Lina, please, help me. Shen's face was as pale as paper, gripping my wrist with such force that it felt like he was about to crush my bones. This collaboration is too important for the Shen family. Sylvia can't be in trouble, her promising life can't have this stain. His handsome face was filled with pleading, but the anxiety and heartache in his eyes were not for me. They were for Sylvia. His white moonlight had just hit someone while driving and then fled the scene. And I was the only passenger in her car. Me, take the blame for her? I asked softly, as if I hadn't heard clearly. Lina, I know this is unfair to you. Shen's voice was trembling. But you're my wife, we're family. If you help me this time, you're helping the entire Shen family. I swear, I'll immediately find the best lawyer, at most a month, no, half a month. I'll definitely get you out unharmed. At that time, I'll give you the seaside villa you want most, and we'll go to the Maldives to make up for our honeymoon, okay? He promised our beautiful future, but every word was like a knife stabbing into my already battered heart. For 3 years of marriage, I cooked and managed the household for him, giving up everything of my own, content to be the unassuming wife behind him. I thought I could warm his stone-cold heart with time. But now I realized his heart wasn't made of stone, that softness simply never belonged to me. With one call from Sylvia, he could abandon me in the middle of the night while I had a high fever and rushed to her side. With Sylvia's mere mention of wanting to see an art exhibition, he could cancel our long-planned wedding anniversary trip. Now, Sylvia had caused a colossal disaster, and he wanted me to sacrifice my entire life to cover for her. What if I end up with a criminal record? I looked into his eyes, trying to find even the slightest trace of guilt. Shen's gaze flickered evasively for a moment, then became resolute again. It won't happen. Lina, you have to trust me. Don't you know my connections? If I say I can get you out, I definitely will. It's just going through the motions. He gripped my shoulders, his tone urgent. The police are coming soon, we don't have time. Lina, I'm begging you. Sylvia, she has a heart condition, she can't handle this shock. Heart condition. It was always the heart condition. Every time he made an exception for Sylvia, it was this reason. I looked at him and suddenly laughed, laughing until tears streamed down my face. 3 years of marriage turned out to be a joke. In Shen's heart, Lina, was nothing more than a tool that could be sacrificed at any time for the woman he truly loved. Fine. I softly uttered the word. Shen immediately looked relieved, his face breaking into ecstatic joy. Lina, I knew you were the best. Don't worry. I interrupted him. Give me your phone. Though puzzled, he immediately unlocked it and handed it to me. I didn't look at him, nor at the window where the siren sounds could already be heard. With my eyes lowered, my fingers quickly dialed a number I knew by heart on the screen, and the moment the call connected, I said only 6 words. Initiate Plan A1. Then, I hung up the phone and returned it to him. Lifting my head, I looked at him with a smile as gentle as on our wedding day. Shen, I agree. I just hope you remember that this is what you begged me for. You begged me to destroy myself for the woman you love. Outside the door, urgent knocking sounded. The gratitude and joy in Shen's eyes nearly overflowed. He hugged me tightly and whispered urgently in my ear, Lina, wait for me. Then, without any lingering attachment, he turned and opened the door. When the cold handcuffs locked around my wrists, I didn't even glance at the uniformed officers. My gaze pierced through the crowd and landed on Shen's face. He stood there watching me, his expression devoid of reluctance, only the relief of having resolved a massive problem. I smiled at him one last time. Shen, the game has begun. You'd better pray you can bear the cost. The air in the detention center was murky and cold. Dressed in numbered clothing, I sat quietly in the corner, out of place amid the surrounding cries and curses. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. It had been 3 days. Shen hadn't come. The best lawyer he promised hadn't appeared either. Every day, I ate cold steamed buns and soup with barely any visible vegetable leaves. The inmates in the same cell saw my fair complexion and unfamiliar face, always trying to cause trouble. But every time they lifted their feet, they would be tripped by some unknown force or suddenly suffer inexplicable stomach pains. After a few times, no one dared approach me anymore. I just sat quietly, counting down in my mind. On the 5th day, the iron door finally opened for me. It wasn't a lawyer who entered, it was Shen. He had lost some weight, with blue stubble on his chin, looking somewhat haggard, but his eyes were bright. Seeing me, he seemed to sigh in relief, with a barely noticeable trace of guilt. "Lina, you've suffered." He sat across from me, separated by a cold iron table. I didn't speak, just quietly watched him. He felt uncomfortable under my gaze and looked away, taking out a document from his briefcase and pushing it toward me. "Lina, I know it's not appropriate to say this now, but Sylvia's condition is very bad. After that day, she's been having nightmares constantly. The doctor says she's suffered severe mental trauma and needs someone with her 24 hours a day." His voice was low, carrying a hint of fatigue. "We should sign first." I lowered my head. The bold black words at the top of the document stung my eyes: divorce agreement. So, he came today not to fulfill his promise, but to make me vacate the position of wife. I flipped through it page by page. Division of marital property, none. The villa we lived in after marriage was his premarital property. The car I drove was registered under his company. My 3 years of devotion were worth nothing. Oh, wait, they were worth something. On the last page of the agreement, he added a clause: in consideration of Lina's contributions during the 3 years of marriage, the husband voluntarily gifts the wife an 80-square-meter apartment in the city center. 80 square meters, what generosity. Using an apartment to buy out my 3 years of youth, to pay for me taking the blame and going to jail for his beloved, and to ensure I leave cleanly. "This house is in a great location, close to your parents' home," Shen added, seeing my prolonged silence. "The password is your birthday." "Lina, I've been more than fair to you." "More than fair?" I finally lifted my head, a sarcastic curve forming at the corner of my mouth. "Shen, do you think I'm particularly easy to fool?" He was stunned, his brows furrowing tightly. "What do you mean?" "Nothing." I picked up the pen on the table, without even looking, and signed my name at the end. Lina. Written cleanly and decisively. I pushed the signed agreement back to him. "Shen, we're even now." He looked at my signature, seemingly not expecting me to be so straightforward. The guilt in his eyes was instantly replaced by a sense of liberation. He quickly put away the agreement, as if afraid I might change my mind. "Lina, thank you for your understanding." He stood up, looking down at me. "Don't worry, I'll handle things outside, you won't be in here for too long." He turned to leave. "Stop." I called out to him. He turned back, somewhat impatient. "What else?" "Shen," I looked at him, asking word by word, "if today I was the one driving and Sylvia was the one hit, what would you do?" His body stiffened. This question, like a sharp knife, tore apart all his disguised affection and morality. He was silent for a long time, so long that I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he avoided my eyes, his voice cold and hard. "There are no ifs." With that, he walked away without looking back. The iron door slammed shut in front of me with a loud clang. I sat there motionless. Tears finally fell uncontrollably. Not for him, but for my dead love, for my ridiculous 3 years. I don't know how much time passed before the iron door opened again. This time, it was the detention center's director, a middle-aged man in his 50s who looked very authoritative. He walked up to me, his face bearing an almost respectful expression. He bent down and handed me a steaming cup of tea with both hands. "Miss Lina, we've made you suffer." Then, he handed me a brand new phone. "Your call." I wiped away my tears, took the phone. The screen showed an ongoing call. I put the phone to my ear. From the other end came a steady and familiar voice. "Young miss, everything is arranged." When I walked out of the detention center's gate, the sunlight was perfect. The warm golden rays fell on me, dispelling the chill of recent days. At the entrance, there was no Shen to pick me up, only a middle-aged man in a black suit with meticulously combed hair. It was Victor, who had been by my father's side for over 20 years. He opened the car door for me, his movements as standard as a textbook. "Young miss, welcome back." I got into the car, took off the moldy prison uniform, and changed into the Chanel suit Victor had prepared long ago. The silk's touch gliding over my skin made me feel truly alive again. "How's the Shen family side?" I asked faintly while fastening the pearl buttons on my cuffs. Replying to "Young miss, on the second day of your incarceration, we had the police suspend the investigation against you on grounds of insufficient evidence. At the same time, we released a high-definition surveillance video showing that the driver of the vehicle involved was someone else," Victor reported while driving steadily. "Now, Sylvia has been listed as the prime suspect. Shen is using all his connections to suppress the matter, but he doesn't know that the people he's approaching have either been bought off by us or are in trouble themselves." I watched the street scene speeding backward outside the window, a cold smile curling at the corner of my mouth. Shen thought his connections reached the heavens, but he didn't know that in the face of true capital, his network was as fragile as a sheet of paper. "What about Shen and Sylvia? They should be celebrating your conviction right now, and incidentally celebrating their upcoming new life." Victor's tone carried a hint of disdain. "Is that so?" I picked up the tablet, looking at the displayed stock price of the Shen Group. "Then we must send them a big gift." The car didn't head home but drove straight to the headquarters of the Shen Group, Shen's family business, SH Group. Stepping in 10-centimeter high heels, amid the shocked gazes of the receptionists, I headed straight to the chairman's office on the top floor. Shen's secretary tried to stop me. "Miss, do you have an appointment?" "Mr. Shen is in a meeting." I ignored her completely and pushed open the heavy solid wood door. In the conference room, all the core members of the Shen family were present. Shen, his father Gordon, his uncle Leon, and several company elders. Seeing me, their expressions were more spectacular than if they had seen a ghost. "Lina?" Shen was the first to stand up, his face full of disbelief. "How are you here? Aren't you supposed to be in jail?" I walked to the side of the head seat at the conference table, which originally belonged to Shen's father, the chairman of SH Group. I reached out and lightly tapped the tabletop. "Sorry to disappoint you." Gordon's face turned ashen, he slammed the table. "Outrageous. Who let you in? Security? Get this woman out." "Get me out?" I laughed, taking out a document from my Hermes bag and throwing it on the table. "Chairman Gordon, before driving me away, why not take a look at this first?" Shen picked up the document, glanced at it, and his face instantly turned pale. "Equity, transfer agreement? 30%? This is impossible." He screamed in disbelief. "Lina, where did you get the money to acquire 30% of our company's shares?" For these 3 years, I dutifully played the role of Shen's wife, never interfering in his work, taking only the 50,000 yuan monthly allowance he gave me. In his eyes, I was just a parasitic vine that needed to depend on him to survive. "Oh, I forgot to introduce myself." I scanned the conference room, looking at all the people shocked into silence, and finally, my gaze landed on Shen's bloodless face. "I, Lina, am the primary heir to LS Global Group. From today onward, I am also the largest shareholder of SH Group." My voice wasn't loud, but it exploded like a thunderbolt in the small conference room. Shen staggered back a step, bumping into a chair, his eyes filled with shattered horror and confusion. He looked at me as if seeing a complete stranger. What did you say?" I said, "I am the primary heir to LS Global." Looking at Shen's devastated appearance, my heart felt no ripple, only the pleasure of revenge. "Don't you understand, Shen?" Gordon, this elder who had dominated the business world for decades, now had a face not ashen but utterly defeated. LS Global. This name in the domestic business world represented an unshakable behemoth. And his proud SH group was nothing more than a slightly larger ant in front of LS Global. Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. Gordon pointed at me, his fingers trembling. If you're the Lin family's young miss, why would you marry Shen and slave away in our family for 3 years? Because I was blind, I answered simply and directly. I turned to the completely stunned Shen, walking toward him step by step. My high heels clicked crisply on the polished floor, each sound like a stomp on his heart. Shen, when you pursued me back then, didn't you say you liked my ordinariness and simplicity? Didn't you say you hated the pampered and scheming nature of those heiresses from wealthy families? For you, I concealed my identity, cut off all contact with my family, and learned to be the ordinary wife you liked. I thought this was love, turns out, it was just convenient for you to control me. His lips trembled, unable to utter a word. You must be regretting it now, right? I leaned close to his ear, saying in a voice only we could hear, regretting why you didn't tee me out of more shares back then, why you didn't extract more value from me. His body trembled violently. Lina. He finally found his voice, hoarse beyond recognition. You've been deceiving me all along? Deceiving you? I laughed as if I'd heard the biggest joke. Shen, who exactly is deceiving whom? Who swore on our wedding anniversary to come home early, yet spent the whole night stargazing with another woman? Who, when I had a fever of 39 degrees, said drink more hot water on the phone, then turned around to celebrate his white moonlight's birthday? Who, for that woman, personally sent his own wife to prison and brought a divorce agreement to force me to sign? With each sentence I spoke, his face paled further. By the end, he was on the verge of collapse. I didn't. I just. He tried to explain, but found everything so feeble. Enough. Gordon roared, interrupting our confrontation. He forced himself to calm down, looking at me. Fine, even if you're the Lin family's young miss, even if you're now SH's largest shareholder. But don't forget, the board still has our Shen family members. Don't dream of controlling the company alone. Is that so? I straightened up, my smile turning cold. Chairman Gordon, you seem to have forgotten that I didn't come here today to discuss with you. I snapped my fingers. The conference room door was pushed open again. This time, a group of uniformed, serious-faced people entered. The leader showed his credentials to Gordon. Mr. Gordon, we are from the Municipal Quality Supervision Bureau. We've received a real name report that the Binjiang No. 1 project under your company's responsibility has serious issues of cutting corners and using substandard materials during construction. Please come with us now to assist in the investigation. Gordon's eyes widened instantly, he couldn't catch his breath, clutched his chest, and fell straight backward. Dad. Chairman. The conference room descended into chaos. I watched all this coldly, without the slightest sympathy. The evidence of cutting corners was planted by Victor's people on my orders. This was just the first gift. Shen supported his tottering father, lifted his head, and looked at me with venomous eyes. Lina, you're so ruthless. Ruthless? I walked up to him, looking down. This is just the beginning. My phone rang. I answered and put it on speaker. From the other end came a panicked voice. Shen. Bad news. The tax bureau is here checking our company's accounts. They say we're suspected of tax evasion and have taken all the ledgers. On the other end was Shen's uncle Leon's voice. SH Group's finances had always been his responsibility. The last trace of color drained from Shen's face. Gordon was urgently sent to the hospital. SH Group was leaderless and in complete disarray. With the twin mountains of tax and quality supervision pressing down, the stock price plummeted, hitting the limit down within 10 minutes of opening. Shen was overwhelmed, dealing with the mess at the hospital and company on one side, while comforting his frightened white moonlight on the other. Sylvia's Sylvia Gallery, in the most prosperous area of the city center, was lavishly acquired by Shen for her. Now, the gallery's entrance was sealed. The reason, substandard fire safety facilities, posing major safety hazards. Sylvia called Shen crying. Shen, what do I do? The gallery is sealed. I have a very important exhibition next week. The venue was all set up, now it's all ruined. Shen, there are so many reporters outside, talking nonsense, saying I'm the mistress, and that I was the one driving and hitting someone. How do they know? Shen comforted her repeatedly on the phone. Sylvia, don't be afraid, stay at home and don't go out. These are minor issues, I'll resolve them soon. He hung up the phone and rushed straight to my temporary office. I was leisurely sipping afternoon tea, watching the growing crowd of reporters and shareholders downstairs at SH Group. Lina. Shen burst in, his eyes bloodshot, like a beast cornered. All of this is your doing, isn't it? I set down my teacup, lifted my eyes to him. So what if it is? Why are you doing this? He roared, his fists clenched until they cracked. Even if you hate me, the company is innocent. The employees are innocent. What good does destroying the company do you? Good? I laughed. Seeing you Shen family members like stray dogs is the greatest benefit. Are you satisfied with this reason? His chest heaved violently, clearly infuriated by my words. He stared at me intently, seemingly trying to find a trace of past tenderness on my face. But he failed. Now, my face held only cold hatred. Lina, we were husband and wife once. Stop. I raised my hand to halt him. Ex-husband, you signed the divorce agreement, and so did I. Now, apart from being business competitors, we have no relationship. The words husband and wife once coming from his mouth were the greatest irony. He was probably out of options and started playing the emotional card. Even if there's no affection between us, what about Sylvia? What did she do wrong? She's so kind, why are you targeting her? Sealing her gallery, spreading rumors online to ruin her reputation. Kind? I laughed as if I'd heard the funniest joke of the century. Would a kind person comfortably enjoy her best friend's husband's money, pretend to be weak in front of him, and mock her best friend as a fool behind her back? Shen was stunned. What do you mean? I didn't speak, just picked up the tablet on the desk and opened an audio file. From it came Sylvia's coquettish voice, carrying a hint of boastfulness and triumph. Oh, you don't know how stupid that woman Lina is. She believes whatever Shen says. If I just say I'm not feeling well, Shen immediately drops her and rushes over. She foolishly thinks Shen loves her, it's hilarious. And also, this gallery Shen gave me cost over 20 million. That idiot Lina gets only 50,000 a month for living expenses and thinks she's a winner in life. Isn't it ridiculous? The audio was a conversation between Sylvia and her friend, dated the day after I was sent to the detention center. Shen's face went from red to white, then to ashen, finally becoming deathly pale. He staggered, as if all his strength had been drained, unable to believe what he heard. No, this isn't real. Sylvia isn't like that. Whether it is or not, you know in your heart. I turned off the audio, stood up, and walked to him. Shen, for such a woman, you abandoned me, destroyed your family, and ruined your future. How do you feel now? He looked at me, his lips trembling, but unable to say a word. The office door was pushed open by my assistant. Lina, the prosecutors are here. I nodded, bypassed the stunned Shen, and walked out. As I passed him, I stopped and told him in a very soft voice. Oh, right, I forgot to tell you. Your precious brother who works in the municipal government seems to have accepted a lot of money he shouldn't have. I've submitted the evidence for you. Shen's body shuddered violently. Shen's brother, Julian, was the Shen family's biggest backer. Young and in a key position with limitless prospects, he was also the son Gordon was most proud of. SH Group could secure so many government projects, including the corner-cutting Binjiang No. 1, thanks to Julian's indispensable contributions. Now, this protective umbrella was broken by my own hands. The news of Julian being taken for investigation exploded like a bombshell, thoroughly detonating the business and political worlds. When the wall falls, everyone pushes. Former partners who called the Shen family brothers now distanced themselves, fearing implication. Bank collection calls came one after another, making Sean's phone red hot. SH Group's stock had hit the limit down for 3 consecutive days, with market value evaporating nearly 70%, on the verge of delisting. The final straw that broke the camel's back was Gordon. Upon learning in the hospital that his youngest son was under investigation, he suffered a stroke from acute distress and was sent to the ICU, remaining unconscious to this day. The Shen family was finished. Utterly and completely finished. Sean's world turned upside down in just a few days. He knelt at the ICU door, his hair turning white overnight. When I received the news, I was in a meeting with LS Global's legal team. The content was how to legally acquire all of SH Group's premium assets at the lowest price. Victor reported softly beside me, "Young miss, Sean wants to see you." No. I didn't even lift my head. He said, "He'll kneel before you." My pen paused. In my mind flashed the image of him begging bitterly before me for Sylvia. How similar. Unfortunately, now I had no interest in watching his performance. "Let him kneel," I said faintly. "He can get up when he figures it out." After the meeting, I walked out of the Lin building. Downstairs, Sean was indeed still kneeling there. Wearing a wrinkled suit, with disheveled hair and stubble, he looked utterly haggard, without a trace of his former spirited demeanor. Seeing me, he acted as if he saw a lifeline, crawling on his knees toward me, trying to grab my pant leg. He was stopped by my bodyguards. "Lina. I was wrong. I really was wrong," he cried out, his voice hoarse, tears and snot streaming. "Please, spare the Shen family. My dad is almost gone. My brother's life is ruined. The company is almost gone. This is all my fault, it has nothing to do with them. Please, for the sake of our past relationship, give me a way out." A crowd had gathered around, pointing and whispering. The once arrogant Sean now knelt on the ground like a dog wagging its tail and begging, truly ironic. I looked down at him, my gaze without a trace of warmth. "Sean, when you begged me, did you ever think about how desperate I felt when you personally sent me to the detention center? When you brought the divorce agreement to force me to sign, did you think about how heartbroken I was? And now you talk to me about past affection? Don't you find it ridiculous?" His crying paused, his face full of regret and pain. "I know I was wrong. Lina, I regret it. I shouldn't have been deceived by Sylvia. I shouldn't have treated you that way. Hit me, curse me, anything. As long as you're willing to spare the Shen family." "Spare you?" I sneered. "When you begged me to take the blame for Sylvia, why didn't you think about sparing me?" I couldn't be bothered to waste more words with him and turned to get in the car. "Lina!" he suddenly roared hoarsely. "Don't force me." I stopped and turned back to look at him. He crawled up from the ground, his eyes revealing a mad ruthlessness. "Do you really think I know nothing? You think you've done it seamlessly? Do you dare say your dad's company is that clean? If you push me too far, we'll both go down. I'll expose everything I know and see who falls first." He was cornered and threatening mutual destruction. Unfortunately, he miscalculated. I looked at him like a clown. "Fine." I nodded, took out my phone, and dialed a number. "Hello, Director Ken? This is Lina. Yes, I have an important clue to report. Sean knows some insider information about LS Global Group. I think your procuratorate would be very interested." From the other end came a vigorous voice, "Good. I'll send someone right away." I hung up the phone and waved it at the now ashen-faced Sean. "Threaten me? Sean, you're not qualified." Sean was taken away by the procuratorate. The charges, malicious defamation and attempted extortion. His threat of mutual destruction became the final straw that crushed him. Without Sean's obstruction, the acquisition of SH Group proceeded exceptionally smoothly. A week later, at a highly anticipated business banquet, I, as vice president of LS Global, formally announced the full acquisition of SH Group. The banquet was filled with dignitaries, elegant and fragrant. Dressed in a red gown, I stood under the spotlight, accepting congratulations and envy from all. At that moment, an uninvited guest burst in. It was Sylvia. Wearing a white dress, with disheveled hair and no trace of her usual refined makeup, she looked haggard and mad. She broke through the security blockade and charged straight at me. "Lina! You bitch! Give Shen back to me!" She roared like a lunatic, lunging at me, raising her hand to hit me. I didn't even need to move, the bodyguards beside me easily restrained her. The banquet guests were stunned, the scene erupted in uproar. Reporters' flashes went off frantically like they cost nothing. Holding my champagne, I walked to the restrained Sylvia, looking at her with interest. "Miss Sylvia, long time no see. How have you been?" "Lina. You venomous woman. Why are you doing this to Shen? He loved you so much. Yet you want to destroy everything he has." Sylvia struggled, her face contorted. "Loved me?" I laughed as if hearing a joke, gently sipping my champagne. "He loved me, so he sent me to prison, and loved you so much that he let you go scot-free?" Sylvia's face paled. "You're talking nonsense. Shen said it was just an accident. He'll protect me." "Is that so?" I set down my glass, took a tablet from my assistant, and turned the screen toward her. Playing on it was a high-definition surveillance video. In the video, a red Porsche lost control and hit a pedestrian, and in the driver's seat was clearly Sylvia's panicked face. The angle was very clear, leaving no room for argument. "Miss Sylvia, after hitting someone while driving, your first action wasn't to call the police or save the person, but to call your best friend's husband to help you clean up the mess. And he, to protect you, didn't hesitate to have his wife of 3 years take the blame for you." Looking at her instantly pale face, my smile deepened. "Tell me, how many newspapers will have this exciting story as tomorrow's headline?" "No, it's not, you can't do this." Sylvia finally felt fear, shaking her head frantically. "This is fake. The video is forged." "Forged?" A cold voice came from behind me. Several uniformed police officers approached, the leader showing an arrest warrant to Sylvia. "Ms. Sylvia, we now have sufficient evidence suspecting your involvement in a hit-and-run traffic accident from 3 days ago. Please come with us to assist in the investigation." The cold handcuffs locked around Sylvia's wrists, just like they had around mine that day. She completely broke down, collapsing to the ground, muttering, "No. Shen will save me, he will definitely come to save me." I walked to her, squatted down, and looked into her desperate eyes. "I forgot to tell you. Your Shen, suspected of harboring a criminal, obstructing justice, and multiple economic crimes, might spend the rest of his life in prison. You two star-crossed lovers can reunite inside and continue your romance." Sylvia's eyes widened suddenly, the last spark extinguishing. She looked at me as if seeing a demon crawled out from hell. I stood up and said to the stunned banquet organizer nearby, "Clean up this trash here, don't spoil everyone's mood." Then, I picked up my wine glass again and toasted the dumbfounded guests from afar. "Sorry to let everyone see that. Let's continue." Shen's mother came to my company 3 days later. Without an appointment, she was stopped at the reception downstairs. So she threw a tantrum in the lobby, rolling on the floor, wailing that I, this vicious woman, had destroyed their family, calling me an ungrateful wretch, that the Shen family had supported me for 3 years, yet I bit the hand that fed me. It attracted quite a crowd. Watching her shrewish performance through the surveillance, I only found it laughable. When I married into the Shen family, she never gave me a good face. She despised my ordinary background, saying I wasn't worthy of her excellent son. She complained I wasn't resourceful, unable to help Shen in his career. The meals I cooked, she always found faults with. The gifts I bought, she threw into the storage without a glance. At least half the grievances I suffered in this marriage were thanks to her. Now, she remembered supporting me for 3 years. I sent my assistant down to handle it. The assistant said to her, "Mrs. Regina, Lina is very busy and has no time to see you." If you continue making a scene here, we'll call the police. Upon hearing about calling the police, Shen's mother immediately got up from the ground, pointing at the assistant's nose and cursing, "Who do you think you are? Tell that bitch Lina to come down and see me. She ate our Shen family's food for 3 years, now she's climbed higher and doesn't recognize us?" The surrounding murmurs grew louder. I picked up the intercom and said to the assistant, "Let her come up." 5 minutes later, Shen's mother was brought to my office. As soon as she entered, she tried to rush and tear at me but was stopped by the bodyguards. "Lina, do you have any conscience? Where did our Shen family wrong you that you have to exterminate us like this?" She was disheveled, eyes bloodshot, like a madwoman. I sat in the spacious boss chair, looking at her coldly. "Mrs. Regina, before I answer your question, why don't you answer mine first? When your son made me take the blame for Sylvia, where were you? When I was locked in the detention center, and your son brought the divorce agreement to force me out with nothing, where were you? Now that your son, your husband, your family are all ruined, you come to question if I have a conscience?" She was rendered speechless by my questions, her face alternating between pale and ashen. That was Shen being foolish. He was bewitched by that vixen. "But you can't destroy our entire Shen family." She started crying, tears coming easily. "Gordon is still lying in the hospital, Julian's future is completely ruined. Lina, I beg you, tell the police it was all a misunderstanding, okay? Let Shen out, let him out." Saying that, she suddenly knelt down with a thud. "Lina, I'm kneeling to you. Before, Mom was wrong, Mom was blind. You're magnanimous, spare us this time. As long as you're willing to let Shen go, I'll do anything. I'll kowtow to you." She really started kowtowing on the ground, thud thud thud, one after another, making the floor resound. I watched quietly, unmoved. If only she knew today, why bother back then? In this world, there is no medicine for regret. The assistant came in timely, handing me a document. "Lina, the final asset transfer documents for SH Group, they need your signature." I picked up the pen, without glancing at the woman kneeling on the ground. I walked to her, bent down, placed the document on her arched back from kowtowing. Then, with that $1,000,000 pen, I signed Lina on her back. The pen tip scratched across the paper, making a rustling sound. It was also like engraving my name on the Shen family's final tombstone. Done. I straightened up and handed the document back to the assistant. "See the guest out." Shen's mother collapsed on the ground, watching my departing back, letting out desperate and venomous wails. I saw Shen again by the riverside. I don't know how he was bailed out, or rather, he was released specifically to see me. The river wind was strong, whipping my long hair and trench coat. He stood 10 meters away, emaciated, like a bamboo pole that would snap with one gust. "We used to love coming here," he said, watching the endless flow of the river was like seeing our unending future. Thinking back now, it's truly ironic. He wasn't mad like last time, nor did he kneel and beg. He just looked at me calmly, his eyes empty like a walking corpse. "Was it worth it?" He spoke, his voice somewhat fragmented by the wind. "I didn't turn back. Destroying a man you once loved, destroying a family, to prove your so-called strength. Do you feel a great sense of accomplishment now?" I turned around, meeting his gaze. "Shen, put away your victim rhetoric. Reaching this point today is all your own doing." "Own doing?" He suddenly laughed, a desolate and mad laugh. "Yes. It's my own doing. My biggest mistake was not seeing that the wife I married wasn't a gentle and virtuous one, but a man-eating beauty snake. I was wrong to believe in your innocence, wrong to think you truly loved me enough to give everything for me." Watching his deranged appearance, I only felt pity. Even now, he still thought it was my fault. "Shen, I'll ask you one last time." My voice was cold. "On our 3rd wedding anniversary, was the sudden company matter real?" He was stunned. "That day, Sylvia called you, saying she was heartbroken, drunk at a bar, asking you to pick her up. After picking her up and sending her home, how long did you stay with her? His face instantly turned pale. How do you know? How do I know? I laughed. The dashcam in your car is a good thing. When I had a 39-degree fever and called you, you said you were in a life-or-death meeting. But at that time, you were with Sylvia, stargazing downstairs from her home. To prepare a birthday surprise for you, I learned Western cuisine for 3 months, blistering my hands, only to wait until 3 a.m., receiving your message, not coming back tonight. And you, meanwhile, liked Sylvia's new selfie on Moments. I walked toward him step by step, with each sentence, his face paled more. Shen, you thought I knew nothing? I was just giving you chances. I thought if I did well enough, one day your gaze would return from her to me. I thought my tolerance and sacrifices could win your true heart. Until the moment you made me take the blame for her, I finally understood. I stood before him, looking into his eyes filled with shock and regret. Your heart can't be warmed. Or rather, it was already heated scorching hot by someone else. His whole body trembled, lips quivering, unable to say a word. So, his self-perceived seamless lies and betrayals, I had seen through them long ago. I was just waiting for him to turn back. And waiting for myself to completely give up. So. He spoke hoarsely. From the beginning, you were scheming against me? No. I shook my head, looking at the dazzling pearl in the distance. I wasn't scheming against you. I just, at the moment you chose to abandon me, chose to reclaim all my love, and take back the justice that rightfully belongs to me. You destroyed my love, so I destroyed your everything. That's fair. I turned away, no longer looking at him. Now, you can scram. Standing here, you're polluting my eyes and dirtying the scenery. Behind me came his complete breakdown, beast-like howls. I stood in the top-floor office that once belonged to SH Group, now mine. Outside the huge floor-to-ceiling windows was Shanghai's bustling city skyline. My father, the helmsman of LS Global, stood beside me, looking at the view outside the window with me. He patted my shoulder, his tone carrying both heartache and relief. It's all over. Yes, it's all over. This farce that began with betrayal and ended with revenge finally drew its curtain. I didn't answer him, just picked up the brand new phone on the desk. The phone's lines were cold and hard. I dialed the assistant's extension. Assistant, send the final judgment results for Shen and Sylvia to my email. Also, notify the legal department to prepare to initiate recovery proceedings for all the Shen family's illegally transferred assets. I want them to have not a penny left. Yes, Lina. Hanging up the phone, I looked at the bustling world outside the window. The sunlight was glaring, yet no longer warm. My father sighed behind me, seeming to want to say something, but ultimately said nothing and quietly left. In the vast office, only I remained. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, pressing my palm against the cold glass. Reflected on the glass was my current face, exquisite makeup, indifferent eyes, a faint curve at the corner of my mouth. It was a strange yet utterly familiar appearance. I, Lina, was back.